Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Full and Thriving, the podcast where we dive deep into personal growth, resilience, and reclaiming your inner strength. I'm your host, Meg McCabe, a certified life coach, recovery coach, community founder, and speaker who has spent the last decade helping other people reach mental healing and build a better life for themselves. Today's episode, titled Mastering Inner Resilience, It's Not What You Think, will challenge everything you thought you knew about bouncing back from life's hardest moments. Our guest, Vally Ann, a transformational coach and really good friend of mine, shares her powerful story of overcoming unimaginable adversity, losing her business and her father during the COVID pandemic, and how she managed to break free from the grip of victim mentality. But here's the twist. Resilience, as Vally learned, isn't about pushing through pain. It's actually all about something you might be surprised to hear. So, if you're ready to redefine what it means to be resilient and learn how to truly thrive from within, stick around. This is one episode you won't want to miss. Hello, Val. Welcome to the show.
Hi, I'm so excited to be here today. Thank you for having me.
Well, I'm so grateful you're here. Actually, this is the second time you've been on the show, so welcome back. It's been a long time.
Been like 2 or 3 years.
I know. I think we were in COVID era during the time we recorded last time.
We definitely were. We both were evolving our podcasts as well, which was really fun.
Yeah, that was so fun. And I was going through a really hard time that time. Like I was in my studio in Denver, living by myself in a really difficult relationship. And I just remember you were such a bright ball of energy that I needed the day we recorded. So I'm extra pumped to have you back because you bring great energy to the show.
Well, thanks, Meg. You do too. That's why we do these things. I love it.
And for everyone listening, Val and I have been friends since we were like young teenagers, essentially.
Yeah.
Really young. And
we have a history.
We were lifeguards together, and it has evolved into an adult friendship. And actually the co-founders of a local organization called the Women's Entrepreneurial Alliance of Connecticut that we just put together this year. Has been so fun to kind of co-pilot a new project with you.
Yes, it's been amazing. And it's going to continue to be amazing, which is so wonderful, the growth that we keep having.
Yes, we have so much ahead. Ugh, I love having a fellow entrepreneur friend local. So anyway, let's dive into it. Val, before we get to the big topic today, which is essentially building resilience and unlocking your inner strength, I want to hear a little bit about your professional background.
Yeah. I mean, who doesn't love talking about themselves, right? So I am a certified transformational coach, to give it a title. Okay. But I really work with women mainly on, building this inner resilience that I call it. So I've been working with women, coaching, mentoring for over 12 years now. And one of the real reasons I love it, that I think is great, and I know you know this from personal experience, is when we grow with our passion in our business, we bring it to our worlds. And that's why it's so effective, because I believe real coaches heal with our communities, right? Because we also experience it to some capacity. And so in a nutshell, that's, my professional goodness that I have. I have a podcast as well, where I just love to give snippets of worthiness and confidence building. And I also, I have a regular 9-to-5 job, for lack of better words. And I always think I was a comedian in a past life as well. So I think that's my professional background. Really put it in a nutshell for everyone.
I love that for you. I like the balance that you have. Yeah. I think one thing I always admire about you is that as a transformation coach, your mindset is always on fire. Like whenever I see you, you have the strong inner voice, the confident inner voice, and you bring up just this happy, wholesome reminder of positivity whenever I am around you. So wanted to give you that. And so anyone in need of a transformational coach, Val is your girl. Because she really does bring the energy and the positivity. So thank you for sharing about yourself.
You're so welcome.
And
Stop.
I know I'm like kind of tearing up. And inner comedian, I think I've had some of the most hilarious times with you too. Yeah, that's a whole different story. But let's dive in. One thing I wanted to ask you, and like this is gonna probably set the stage in a way, is do you have any personal experience of adversity in your life that required you to tap into your own inner strength and resilience? And could you walk us through that period of your life?
Absolutely. I think one of the biggest strong points is having someone be able to be vulnerable and transparent. And I think sometimes, individuals in our field might have a hard time doing that because it's like we want to come off as we know everything, we've never gone through anything, right? But what really triggers all of this is when all of us have some monumental, really difficult time and you're given a choice. Okay, is this going to define me or am I going to really choose differently and have to face things that I've been ultimately avoiding, which is inner healing. Okay, it just is. And I always say it's not fun. Inner healing sometimes is not fun. It's not like an amusement park or a vacation with margaritas. But the end result is being able to look in the mirror and say, this happened to me, but I am this person and I know who that is. Mm-hmm. So it essentially started around COVID time, and it wasn't because of COVID time. Ironically, it wasn't because of that period. I think it ultimately affected and didn't make it easier. But that was when the direct marketing business that I was doing, that I was a very big leader in, everything just basically dissolved. So my identity, my job, my income, just everything I knew for a decade, right? The role, quote unquote, that I was playing just dissolved out of my control. And at the time, that was when my dad was sick and he ended up passing. So I was going through grieving, which is another element of worth and resilience, that at the time I didn't realize. So I was kind of going through that identity because we essentially identify our value and our worth through what we do naturally,
Mm-hmm.
right? And then obviously losing a parent has a different value of identity, inner healing, and grief. So those were the two things that went together that have really launched me to where I am now, to the methods that I teach, to the passion that I have to my clients and communities, and ultimately the realistic tactics behind it, because I was so into fake it till you make it, if you will.
Yeah.
Right. These tactics that don't really work. And when I was in my lowest of low, right, grieving, not having really a job, not knowing what I was doing, those things didn't work anymore. So I was like, okay, what are we going to do that works?
Wow. So what was it like to be in that place where you were grieving and you saw the coaching business you had built just dissolve away? What was that experience like as now that you're looking back at it?
So during it, I definitely was victim mentality, which I think naturally anybody would go through.
Could you quickly explain what that is?
I can. Yes. It essentially, like I say, I like to explain things kind of just in a real perspective. I really just felt like everything is happening to me.
Yeah.
I'm a good person. Why is this happening to me? I don't deserve it. And I really just let that be my energy. And I felt like I didn't have choices.
Wow. I like how you articulate that. I think so many people are in that place and they can't truly recognize it. So you had this victim mentality. What else were you experiencing looking back?
Yeah, I definitely was not confident in anything. that I was feeling, doing. And I know this can correlate to any situational change that anyone experiences in life, right? Anything that is a shift, transition, we lose our confidence. We question, who are we? Do I have a purpose? Do I really matter? So those were all the feelings, the energy, how I presented myself. That was what was happening at that time. I'm not laughing at it, but that's just how I am. I giggle at things.
I'm a giggler too, straight
I
up.
giggle.
I giggle to cope sometimes. It's
yes,
okay.
Exactly. That's what it is.
Nervous laugh. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah. What it is, right?
But okay, I appreciate you opening up about that. So you're in that headspace, and how did you start to realize something needed to shift?
I believe because I experienced this, and whether you have exposure to the personal growth world or not, when you get to a low point, there is a point in time where you realize something needs to shift.
Mm-hmm.
And in that moment that you have with yourself, you have a decision. Am I strong enough to face this shift? And what am I willing to do? Keyword.
Yeah.
What am I willing to do? What am I willing to face? What am I willing to adjust? I don't say change because I don't think anyone actually needs to change. I think it's these adjustments, shifts, perspectives.
I like that distinction, actually. A shift feels so much more manageable than a change.
Right. Because a change infers something's actually wrong with us. And when we're going through these mentalities, there's nothing wrong with us, right? We are still full as the human being. We just have these concepts and ideas that are overwhelmingly attacking our energy and how we show up at the moment.
So true. So true.
So I just was like, something needs to shift.
Yeah.
What are we doing?
Mm-hmm.
I had a moment with myself in the mirror. Val, what are we doing here? This doesn't feel good where I'm at. This isn't fixing a situation. What's next? That was essentially what I asked myself.
I can picture you in the mirror, like saying this out loud.
What is happening?
Yeah. And did you have the answer right away, or what, where did it go from there?
Well, what happened for me was I realized the answer was what I was doing was not working. So I went from there. So I did not have the answer as to what I needed at that time, what routines, what, language I needed to have with myself. It was, this is how you've been showing up. This is not working for you.
Mm-hmm.
So that is what I started with.
Okay. So you're meeting yourself where you're at. I think that's a really good step to building resilience, is owning your stuff and owning, like, this is my reality. Like, this is just not working, period. I don't have to solve it right away, but I can accept this.
That's exactly it. It's coming to this level of acceptance and not resisting it, because that then allows you to say, okay, Val, you're here at this moment right now. Ultimately, you have to love yourself when you're at this moment, because then you stop resisting it. Mm-hmm. Whatever shifts need to change, And then I started to not judge myself and not start putting my pressure on myself again. And, it was just having to accept. And that was not easy. And I don't think it's really easy for anyone to accept when we're in a position of not being our best versions of ourselves.
Yeah.
But I felt more free once I said, Val, I accept you right now as you are.
Oh, I love that. I want to give you a little applause, because that's just exactly the best place to start. I think when you're facing adversity, facing a place where your worth is in the toilet, getting to some sort of level of acceptance and a little bit of love and compassion can go a long way. So I love that. And then were you able to get back up on your feet? What were the steps you took to bring yourself through this and build that resilience from this moment?
Yeah. So I didn't actually realize it was resilience at the time. Okay.
Right.
So I believe we're always building our resilience. because there's always times in our life we're going to face adversity depending on our changes of our seasons, what's happening. And I think the beautiful thing is once you start to accept where you're at every stage of adversity, whatever it might be, and you can just identify, I have resilience, right? Can continue to go through those stages. So I had to build it. And the first step was realizing what wasn't working for me. And it was continuously forgiving myself when I wanted to judge myself, when I wanted to be the first person to say, what you're doing today is not enough. You're not there yet, comparing. So I made note of all of those very just non-serving thoughts and feelings. And I made an intentional decision to make them quiet when they appeared. So that was essentially the first step was what is coming up? What actions am I doing? So did I need to limit social media at the time? Were there accounts I needed to unfollow? I needed to redefine what's important to me right now? What does confidence look like for me? What is my version of happiness? All those things. So I just had some questions I asked myself and I created like a me list that I do. I still do it actually every day, checking in with myself, aligning with my version of happiness, my version of success to keep me aligned throughout the day.
I'm obsessed with this idea. So what do you call it? Your me list?
Yeah, it's just the me list. Like I made it, right?
What's on
Instagram didn't make it, accolades didn't make it. So it's all these things that I was also unconditioning. So there might be listeners you have on this podcast right now. I know this from other women I've mentored in the past. We're conditioned to say, you're successful if here is your list that you have to have, whatever it is. Okay. So my mission is to just uncondition that with every single person I speak with because it's so overwhelming right now in the society that we live in.
Really?
And you have to catch yourself. So essentially my me list, I've realized I'm a very simple person, right? Like there's a lot of things in my previous direct sales career. I thought I liked big, shiny, expensive things, accolades, names, level. I can't think of the word right now, just promotions. Exactly. I really identified myself with my relationship status, what I was doing in that business, what's in my bank account. So my basic question is, what am I doing today that's bringing me joy? That is essentially what is my main driving factor every day on my me list. Because whether we're working for ourselves, whether we are working, for somebody else, whether we're in a situation we want to shift, we can always control joy in our everyday mundane, joyless situations, if you will.
I love that. So that's your essential almost practice for breaking into that resilient place, it sounds like, is connecting to joy. I personally did not see this going this way, but I love it because I think that's such a helpful reminder. And your joy list, in my opinion, must be something related to the beach. What is your joy list right now?
Yes. So I think one of the reasons this has been so successful with me and just others I've worked with and shared it with is because you get to design that joy. So every day you're not avoiding responsibilities that you have. We all do things that we don't love all the time, right? Okay. But it's our choice what we do with the other hours of that day or how we show up in those moments. It's even might be just sharing a funny meme that brings joy to that situation and it changes the entire energy. So, on days that I can, it is around the beach or around water, right? But one main thing that I know I can control no matter what I'm doing, right? If I am working a 10 or 12-hour day is just instilling being present, what I can control and laughter. And that connects to my joy because essentially being present is my main focus all the time.
Mm-hmm. That is so beautiful and helpful. I'm feeling inspired because I want to go think about my joy list now and work on some of that, like almost deprogramming that you're talking about before. Speaking of, when you talk about this deprogramming, what are some of the things that people really burden themselves with or measure their worth against that might not necessarily be like helping them build resilience, but keeping them stuck?
It's a great question. And it's something that I still work with. So I talk about this too, because I think it's something that I want everyone to know. It's not, I did this for 6 months. I never measure myself against worth like this again. The difference is you acknowledge it. And because you created, well, no, this is me. This is what my blueprint is. This is what's important to me. You're like, thanks for visiting, noise. And then you go back to it, right? It's like someone from the past that you didn't want to see. You're just like, hey, at the grocery store, but it doesn't really affect your life anymore, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So the deprogramming, now to answer your question, some of the things, like I mentioned a little bit before, everyone's are what we do for work. One of the biggest things when you ask somebody, you first meet them. Hi, what's your name? What do you do? And it's almost like everyone gets this clammy, like, okay, this is my 5 seconds of having to impress someone.
Yeah.
Where we should say, what do you do? It should be something like, I treat everyone with kindness. I do the best I can. I like to have fun.
Mm-hmm.
What we do shouldn't be what we maybe essentially get paid to do.
Yes. Yeah. That's really important to deprogram your worth from. I completely agree because you're right. I've felt like in those moments sometimes when people ask, what do? You do feel this weird pressure, like you have to prove your worth in that minute.
Yes.
And it's so uncomfortable. And in reality, it doesn't give the full picture of who we are.
Right. Or satisfaction, really. Or, no one ever knows what anyone's going through when they're just doing the job, quote unquote, that y'all initially want to say. So that deprogramming, it's still something I work on when someone's like, what do you do? I'm like, Val, you don't have to say your job. Like, what's something different, unique? That's how we start to change the language, is by responding differently. Like, is it weird and awkward? Of course it is, because it's not what not normal. It's not what most people respond with. But if we want to kind of shift things about, right, it's all about how we feel when we're talking about something. So we set the tone with energy. So if we're saying, okay, when I was a waitress, for a year that I had my in-between time, I felt shame with that. And I hated that I felt shame with that because it's a hard job. Okay. Number one, it's so hard. And I worked with amazing individuals. So anyway, one of the things that I learned from that was just embracing what I do when I'm at that moment, but how I deliver it, having energy that shows respect for myself and that I love myself no matter what it is that comes out of my mouth.
Yes.
That I say I do.
I remember getting dinner with you and a few of our friends, and you were sharing that you were going to go back to waitressing. And I remember celebrating that because we all know you're a great waitress. Like, we were like,
I know.
That's awesome. We're so happy that you're doing that again. So you did bring that energy of excitement because that's how we received it.
Right.
Which is,
it took intention.
Yeah.
So initially, I'm not going to sit here and say, hey, everyone, I felt great initially when I was doing it, but I acknowledged that I was putting that pressure of my worth on it. And then I made the adjustment. So every time I had an opportunity to talk about what I did, quote unquote, that was my opportunity to prove to myself I wasn't equating my worth with what I do for occupation at that time.
That's a really nice piece of insight to have. Just in the moment, noticing I'm I'm putting my worth on this thing and I need to intentionally shift my energy around it because I don't believe in that. And I think one thing that's really beautiful about you sharing your story is that there was a part of you during that time of like deep emotional pain where you worked really hard to meet your needs and you weren't resisting like making changes that maybe your ego could have gotten in the way of, your ego could have told you, no, waitressing, you're past that now. Like you should avoid that. How did that feel? What was that like to go to things and not let your ego get in the way?
I'm really glad you brought that up because ego doesn't ever go away. It's just there. Okay. And it's our choice to say, are we going to listen to the ego or what's going to be louder? So I got to a point where I realized it was my ego. And that's another step that takes some time. And it goes to, so if someone wants to start this, what is not serving me? What doesn't feel good? Because I ultimately didn't believe that my worth was any less from being a server. Because when I go out, I don't think of anyone any less when they're a server, with me, right? To me, or whatever the right words are. But so where did that belief come from? So when I was feeling not good about something, I essentially just asked myself, is this something I really align with and believe? And if it is, how can I shift it, make an improvement? If it's not, how am I changing the language so ego is quieter? Because it's going to appear. So it wasn't an overnight process. It's still something I work with all the time. Especially, I feel as a woman, you have all these different standards of all these different opinions people can offer. I'm trying to be very careful with my wording. So going to what makes you happy, what your version of this looks like, and just knowing that and being true to that. And then also just having loving language to yourself where, okay, maybe I gave into my ego at that time. That's okay. There's another chance, another opportunity will arise later on.
That makes so much sense. And it's so funny because when I think of resilience, and this is where I love where this interview has gone, I think of people almost like constantly getting back up on the horse. And I hear a lot of clients say, and like people in the mental health world, because they are struggling, saying, I'm so tired of being resilient. I'm exhausted. Like, when can I just like not be this way? Like, people are just hitting wall after wall after wall. And from what I'm hearing from you, resilience isn't necessarily about always getting back up right on the horse. It's about acceptance and meeting yourself where you're at.
Yes, that is how I define resilience, because for so long, I felt that way. Why do I have to keep being so strong? Why do I have to keep doing X, Y, and Z? What's wrong with me? Essentially, you get that thought when you feel like you have to always be resilient, like something's wrong with you. But when really you look at it as resilience is just a characteristic I hold and have. So in this moment, this week, I might need to be a little more resilient than I was last week because maybe I didn't sleep well. Maybe my diet was off last week. Maybe, I had different level of stress. So it doesn't always have to be this monumental event that makes you be resilient. It's showing up for yourself and knowing you love yourself, where you're at this time, and stop resisting it.
I think that's great. It's a different approach. It's like we're using that compassion to give us a energy boost that maybe traditional concepts of resilience don't take into account, right? So if you are someone who's constantly feeling resilient and resentful because of that, maybe you have it all wrong.
My question would be, do you really accept yourself where you're at, like you would a best friend. If you called me and was like, this is where I'm at this month, I would never say, Meg, that's not enough. But that's what we do to ourselves when we're in different stages or working through adversity at whatever levels it is, where if we could just say, I'm at this spot right now, and that's okay.
Got it. I love that. I think that's so helpful because you don't have to burn yourself out to be seen as resilient, right? You don't have to be constantly pushing, pushing, pushing. It's actually more about surrendering and like relaxing into the moment and letting yourself just be. And I love that. So Val, with your story, just want to make sure we get there. Do you feel like if you were to kind of wrap your story up, like you're going back, you're meeting yourself where you are, how did you feel at the end of all of it?
At the end of that story,
Okay.
because resilience is never ending. I think the more we grow, we want to be better versions of ourselves, et cetera, et cetera. So, I would say that happened probably recently because it was so much. So that was almost 4 years ago when I really realized and worked through all those things. So number one, being patient with myself and just truly giving myself grace during those times. So now I'm looking back, I'm telling you the story. I'm saying it wasn't something that defined me. It was something that I went through. It was something I experienced. And I'm grateful I had enough awareness at that time to ask myself the right questions. I do know that if I had resources like this, I would have probably experienced it maybe a little quicker, maybe with more grace, maybe with less bumps in the road, less harder days mentally and emotionally with guidance, which is why, I talk about it because there are ways it can be smoother and quicker. But it took me a while to have those light bulb moments.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, because I was going through it.
Yeah.
So I'm really proud of it. And I don't regret anything that I felt at the time. I'm grateful for it, to be honest.
Well, I love that. I'm grateful for it too, because it sounds like you've evolved so much.
Yeah.
As a human. So I think one more question I want to ask you is just quickly about what do you find gets in the way for the people you work with who are at that low place? You mentioned victim mentality before.
Yeah.
That's a really good example. Are there any other examples of things that usually get in the way of someone building that resilience?
I think one of the main ways would be not asking for help. So I find I'm working with, when we're really low, we tend to, if we have a coach or a community, we stop responding because we feel like I have nothing to celebrate. I don't feel good enough to celebrate. So I'm going to go into hermit mode. So because I know that about myself, and it took a lot of courage for me to reach out when I needed, just vocalizing where I was at, rather. Maybe I didn't need help. I just needed to vocalize it to my support system. So I'll notice when there's crickets, I'll say, hi, how's the week going? Like, where are we at right now? Kind of like, this is a non-judgmental area. Where's our level of acceptance right now? And then that's normally when I feel like I've reverted. I feel like I've gone backwards, Val. And then we, after a conversation, realize, oh, I haven't gone backwards. This is just where I'm at right now.
I love that. That's such a good little piece of wisdom for the group is, avoiding asking for help is not going to get you anywhere. Like being able to show up with your truth and ask for help in the moment absolutely builds resilience. So that was such a good piece. Thank you for that. Anything else you want to share on that note?
I think the last thing I really want to share that I'm just so passionate about with anyone going through something, which
Yeah.
is almost everybody.
Yeah.
Okay. Is knowing there's nothing about you need to change. But if there's something that you want to shift, to know you have the strength and the courage to do it. When you get to the point of just accepting where you're at that moment and keeping it simple. What brings me joy? How can I be present today? The rest of it starts to unfold before you.
Wow, Val, that was beautiful. I'm so grateful I could have you on the show today. It was super fun to dive into this topic.
Thank you.
I will always sing your praises. I'm just grateful to have you in my life. And yes, thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you for having me. This is always great. I'll be here anytime.
I love it.
I love this show. I love your platform. I love everything you're doing for the world and you continue to do.
Thank you. For everyone listening, how can they find you if they want to connect with you?
Yeah. So they can find me on Instagram. I'm Vally Ann Co, but it's Valley without an E. Okay. Or it's vallyann.com. And those are the two best ways to get a hold of me.
Amazing. All right. Thanks again, Val.
You're welcome, Meg. Talk to you soon.
So there you have it. Another episode of Full and Thriving in the books. I want to personally thank you for joining me in listening to today's show. And if you found value in this conversation, I would be so grateful if you could please take a moment to subscribe to the show and leave a review. Your support not only helps us reach more people who are striving to live their most full and thriving life, but it also allows us to bring on even more incredible guests with valuable insights that can change your life. Every follow, every review makes a huge difference, and together we can continue to grow this beautiful community. Thanks again for being a part of the journey, and we'll see you next time on Full and Thriving.